तलब से ताब गुलिस्तां है रौनकें को हो दमन है.
We were Kashmiris. Over 200 years ago, early in the 18th century, our ancestor came down from the mountain valley to seek fame and fortune in the rich plains below. Raj Kaur was the name of that ancestor of ours. He had gained eminence as a Sanskrit and Persian scholar in Kashmir.
शफाफ पानियों में असर बादए तरब खुशबू बसी हूँ.
I was born in Allahabad on November the 14th, 1889. My father worked in the High Court. At an early age, he had established himself as a successful lawyer. He had taken firm grip of the ladder of success, not by anyone's favor, as he felt, but by his own will and intellect. I admired father tremendously. He seemed to me the embodiment of strength and courage and cleverness. When I was 10 years old, we changed over to a new and much bigger house, which my father named Anand Bhavan. Our house was far from being a lonely place, for it sheltered a large family of cousins and near relations. I saw much more of mother than I did of father, and she seemed nearer to me, and I would confide in her. My childhood was thus a sheltered and uneventful one. I listened to the grown-up talk of my cousins without always understanding all of it. Often this talk related to the overbearing character and insulting manner of the English people. England came to India when Queen Elizabeth gave a charter to the East India Company in 1600. The British came as freebooters, and their first period was a predatory one. This was followed by a more systematized method of extortion. Foreign trade of India was crushed. The most cruel and unscrupulous methods were used to kill flourishing Indian industries in order to find markets for British goods. In 1858, after the shock of the Indian Mutiny and Revolt, the East India Company transferred its domain of India to the British Crown. On the political side, the Indian National Congress was started in 1885. It was a very moderate body. The National Congress was just then attracting the attention of the English-knowing middle class, and my father visited some of its early sessions and gave it a theoretical allegiance. In May 1905, when I was 15, we set sail for England. Father and mother, my baby sister, and I, we all went together. I was a little fortunate in finding a vacancy at Harrow. Never before had I been left among strangers all by myself, and I felt lonely and homesick, but not for long. Father wrote to me, "We leave you in flesh, but will always be with you in spirit. I never thought that I loved you so much as when I had to part with you. I have not the slightest doubt that you will rise to all my expectations and more." Just then, an event took place which shook Bengal to the depths and stirred the whole of India. The British government divided up the great province of Bengal into two parts, one of these being Eastern Bengal. Eastern Bengal had a majority of Muslims, so by this division, a Hindu-Muslim question was also raised. A great anti-British movement rose in Bengal. The cry of Swadeshi was first raised then, and with it, the boycott of British goods. Side by side with it, there arose a school of revolutionary violence, and the bomb first made its appearance in Indian politics. Cambridge, Trinity College, the beginning of October 1907. 3 quiet years with little of disturbance in them. I took the natural sciences tripos, my subjects being chemistry, geology, and botany. During my stay at Cambridge, the question had arisen as to what career I should take up. So the die was cast in favor of the paternal profession, the bar, and I joined the Inner Temple. For the next 2 years, I hovered about London. My law studies did not take up much time. For the rest, I simply drifted. My father wrote to me, "However indulgent I may be, I am not the man to stand nonsense. Again, the idea of throwing away 40 pounds in the way you did does not commend itself to me." I replied, "Either you trust me or you do not. If you do, then surely no accounts are necessary. If you do not, then accounts I send you are not to be relied upon." Sometime later, my father wrote to me, "I have received the command of His Gracious Majesty King Emperor George V to be in attendance at Delhi. A funny way of inviting a gentleman." I replied, "I got your cable day before yesterday and have ordered the court dress and the other clothes you require at Poole's. I suppose you want the ordinary levee dress with sword and everything complete?" In the summer of 1912, I was called to the bar, and in the autumn of that year, I returned to India after a stay of over 7 years in England. I'm afraid as I landed in Bombay, I was a bit of a prig, with little to recommend me. I felt dissatisfied with life in those early years after my return from England. Towards the end of 1912, India was politically very dull. Politics, which to me meant aggressive, nationalistic activity against foreign rule, offered no scope for this. I joined the Congress and took part in its occasional meetings. The Bankipur Congress during Christmas of 1912 was very much an English-knowing upper-class affair, where morning coats and well-pressed trousers were greatly in evidence. Essentially, it was a social gathering with no political excitement or tension. Gokhale attended it and was the outstanding person of the session. The World War absorbed our attention. The great powers lined up in two groups, the Triple Alliance of Germany, Austria and Italy, and the Triple Entente of England, France and Russia. The first day of August 1914 saw the gathering and marching of the armies of Europe. With the coming of the war ended the epoch of the 19th century. The majestic and calmly flowing river of Western civilization was suddenly swallowed up in the whirlpool of war. It was not India's war. She was but a dependency of Britain, forced to toe the line of her imperialist mistress. The Defence of India Act held the country in its grip. And so, in spite of large resentment in the country, Indian soldiers fought against Turks and Egyptians and others, and made India's name bitterly disliked in Western Asia. As the war proceeded, a handful of people made huge profits, but the great majority felt the strain more and more. The demand for more men for the front went on growing, and recruitment for the army became very intense. These methods were greatly resented by the people. There was something elusive about Kamala, something fairy-like, real but insubstantial, difficult to grasp. At that time, I was 26 and she was 17. Essentially, she was an Indian girl, and more particularly, a Kashmiri girl, sensitive and proud, childlike and grown-up, wise. I have come across few persons who have produced such an impression of sincerity upon me as she did. My marriage took place in 1916 in the city of Delhi. It was on the Vasant Panchami day, which heralds the coming of spring. Indira Priyadarshini, the year you were born, 1917, was one of the memorable years of history, when a great leader with a heart full of love and sympathy for the poor and the suffering made his people write a noble and never to be forgotten chapter of history. In the very month in which you were born, Lenin started the Great Revolution. The end of the war found India in a state of suppressed excitement, resentful, rather aggressive, not very hopeful, but still expectant. Within a few months, the first fruits of the new British policy, as eagerly awaited for, appeared. The Rowlatt Bills. Instead of more freedom, there was to be more repression, with their drastic provision for arrest and trial without any of the checks and formalities. A wave of anger greeted them all over India. And then Gandhi came. He was like a powerful current of fresh air that made us stretch ourselves and take deep breaths, like a beam of light that pierced the darkness and removed the scales from our eyes, like a whirlwind that upset many things, but most of all the working of people's minds. He did not descend from the top. He seemed to emerge from the millions of India, speaking their language and incessantly drawing attention to them and their appalling condition. The essence of his teaching was fearlessness and truth and action, always keeping the welfare of the masses in view. The greatest gift for an individual or a nation, we have been told in our ancient books, was abhaya, fearlessness. Not merely bodily courage, but absence of fear from the mind. But the dominant impulse under British rule was that of fear. Pervasive, oppressive, strangling fear. Fear of the official class, fear of laws made to suppress, and of prison, fear of the landlord's agent, fear of the moneylender, fear of unemployment and starvation, which were always on the threshold. It was against all this prevalent fear that Gandhiji's quiet and determined voice was raised. Be not afraid. A new technique of action was evolved, which, though perfectly peaceful, yet implied non-submission to what was considered wrong, and as a consequence, willing acceptance of pain and suffering involved in this. The Congress made the decisive step and accepted the program of non-cooperation proposed by Gandhiji. It was supposed to hold boycotts, refusal of the titles given by the foreign government, boycott of official functions, boycott of courts of law, government schools and colleges. The boycott was to be spread to state and military services and the payment of taxes. As for the constructive programs, the emphasis was made on the making of khadi cloth and the creation of courts of arbitration, which would function instead of the normal courts of law. Two other important aspects of the program concerned the unity of the Hindus and Muslims and the abolition of untouchability among the Hindus. Gandhiji took the leadership in his first all-India agitation. He started the Satyagraha Sabha, the members of which were pledged to disobey the Rowlatt Act. Satyagraha Day. All India hartals and complete suspension of business. The massacre at Jallianwala Bagh. The long horror and terrible indignity of the martial law in the Punjab. A bitter sense of humiliation and passionate anger filled our people. All the unending talks of constitutional reform and Indianization of the services was a mockery and an insult, when the manhood of our country was being crushed and the inexorable process of exploitation was sapping our vitality. We had become a derelict nation. In those days I realized better than at any time before how cruel and immoral imperialism was. Just then, a new interest developed in my life, which was to play an important part in later years. I was thrown, almost without any will of my own, into contact with peasantry. Looking at them and their misery, I was filled with shame and sorrow. Shame at my own easy-going and comfortable life, and the petty politics of the city which ignored this vast multitude of semi-naked sons and daughters of India. Sorrow at the degradation and the overwhelming poverty of India. I can never forget the shock that came to me that human beings should labor thus. Get off the backs of these peasants and workers, Gandhiji told us. All of you who live by their exploitation, get rid of the system which produces this poverty and misery. Political freedom took new shape then and acquired a new content. Commenting on the unrest, the Lieutenant Governor of the United Provinces noted, "The Raja of Barao says that extremist meetings have been held, preaching pure Bolshevism." The CID reported, "The Bolshevism idea is also spreading, that it is the cultivators who plow, sow, irrigate and reap and are thus entitled to the whole of the produce of the land." Gandhiji made Congress democratic and a mass organization. The peasants rolled in, and in its new garb, it began to assume the look of an agrarian organization with a strong sprinkling of middle classes. I became wholly absorbed and wrapped in the movement. In spite of the strength of my family bonds, I almost forgot my family, my wife, my daughter. "Go to the villages," was the slogan, and we trudged many a mile across the fields and visited distant villages and addressed peasant meetings. I experienced the thrill of the power of influencing the masses. The end of the year brought matters to a head. The Prince of Wales was coming to India, and the Congress had proclaimed a boycott of all the functions in connection with his visit early in December. Mass arrests began. All the prominent Congress leaders and workers in these provinces were arrested, and ordinary volunteers by the thousand went to prison. Both my father and I had been sentenced to 6 months' imprisonment. Time was not a luxury for us. It was more of a burden. The time I spent in watching the ever-shifting monsoon clouds was filled with delight and a sense of relief. I had the joy of having made almost a discovery and a feeling of escape from confinement. How amazing is the spirit of man. In spite of innumerable failings, man throughout the ages has sacrificed his life and all he held dear for an ideal, for truth, for faith, for country and honor. That ideal may change, but that capacity for self-sacrifice continues. And because of that, much may be forgiven to man, and it is impossible to lose hope for him. In the midst of disaster, he has not lost his dignity or his faith in the values he cherished. One misses many things in prison, But perhaps most of all, one misses the sound of women's voices and children's laughter. Suddenly, we in prison learned that Gandhiji had stopped the aggressive aspects of our struggle. This was because of what had happened near the village of Chori Chora, where a mob of villagers had retaliated on some policemen by setting fire to the police station and burning half a dozen or so policemen in it. Were a remote village and a mob of excited peasants in an out-of-the-way place going to put an end, for some time at least, to our national struggle for freedom? Gandhiji wrote, "My dear Jawahar Lal, I assure you that if the things had not been suspended, we would have been leading not a non-violent struggle, but essentially a violent struggle. The cause will prosper by this retreat. The movement had unconsciously drifted from the right path. We have come back to our moorings." Sitaram, Sitaram, bhaj pyare tu Sitaram. On the last day of January 1923, all of us politicals in the Lucknow jail were discharged. Autumn 1925. My wife fell seriously ill. Further treatment in Switzerland was recommended. I welcomed the idea, for I wanted to go out of India myself. My mind was befogged, and no clear path was visible. And I thought, perhaps, if I was far from India, I could see things in a better perspective and lighten up the dark corners of my mind. I was coming back to Europe after more than 13 years. Years of war and revolution and tremendous change. The old world I knew had expired in the blood and horror of the war, and a new world awaited me. Towards the end of 1926, I happened to be in Berlin, and I learned there of a forthcoming Congress of oppressed nationalities, which was to be held at Brussels. I was appointed the Indian Congress representative for this purpose. It was felt more and more that the struggle for freedom was a common one against the thing called imperialism. The Brussels Congress and the subsequent committee meetings of the League helped me to understand some of the problems of colonial and dependent countries. My father came to Europe. All of us, my father, my wife, my young sister, and I, paid a brief visit to Moscow during the 10th anniversary celebrations of the Soviet. We were glad we went, for even that glimpse was worthwhile. Pravda reported, despite the obstacles created by the British authorities, Indian delegates will attend celebrations in Moscow. In a few days, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, a most prominent leader of the Indian national movement, is arriving. He will come to Moscow accompanied by his son, Jawahar Lal Nehru, leader of the left wing of the Indian National Congress. It is difficult to feel indifferent to Russia and even more difficult to judge her failures and achievements impartially. It interests us especially because conditions there have not been, and are not even now, very dissimilar. Both are vast agricultural countries with only the beginnings of industrialization, and both have to face poverty and illiteracy. If Russia finds a satisfactory solution for these, our work in India is made easier. Soviet revolution has advanced human society by a great leap and has lit a bright flame which could not be smothered. In particular, I was impressed by the reports of the great progress made by the backward regions of Central Asia under the Soviet regime. Lenin looked into the future and thought only of what was to be, while other countries lay numbed under the dead hand of the past. I was returning from Europe in good physical and mental condition. My outlook was wider, and nationalism by itself seemed to me definitely a narrow and insufficient creed. Political freedom, independence were no doubt essential, but they were steps only in the right direction. Without social freedom and a socialistic structure of society and the state, neither the country nor the individual could develop much. The Congress held its annual session, and for the first time stood for the national independence of India. Gandhiji wrote to me, "I love you too well to restrain my pen when I feel I must write. You are going too fast. You should have taken time to think and become acclimatized. Most of the resolutions you framed and got carried could have been delayed for 1 year." I replied, "You have described the independence resolution as hastily conceived and thoughtlessly passed. As you know, it was passed almost unanimously, both in the committee and in the open Congress. You have advocated very eloquently and forcefully the claims of the Daridra Narayan, the poor in India. Yet you do not say a word against the semi-feudal zamindari system, which prevails in a great part of India, or against the capitalist exploitation of both the workers and the consumers." Gandhiji wrote back, "Though I was beginning to detect some differences in viewpoint between you and me, I had no notion whatsoever of the terrible extent of these differences. I see quite clearly that you must carry on an open warfare against me and my views, for if I am wrong, I am doing irreparable harm to the country." I replied, "You know how intensely I have admired you and believed in you as a leader who can lead this country to victory and freedom. I felt intensively that however much I may disagree with you, your great personality and your possession of these qualities would carry us to our goal. During the non-cooperation period, you were supreme. You were in your element, and automatically you took the right step. But since you came out of prison, something seems to have gone wrong, and you have been very obviously ill at ease. You misjudge greatly, I think, the civilization of the West, and attach too great an importance to its many failings. It is the opinion of most thinkers in the West that these defects are not due to industrialism as such, but to the capitalistic system which is based on exploitation of others. I believe you have stated that in your opinion there is no necessary conflict between capital and labor. I think that under the capitalistic system, this conflict is unavoidable." The British government announced the dispatch of a commission to India to learn what reforms and changes in the structure of the administration were required for the future. All Indian political figures and organizations were surprised over this announcement. Meanwhile, the Simon Commission had been moving about, pursued by black flag demonstrations and hostile crowds shouting, "Go back." We were stopped by the police as we approached the station. It was a tremendous hammering, and the clearness of conviction that I had had on the evening before left me. I felt half blinded with the blows, and sometimes a dull anger seized me and a desire to hit out. But long training and discipline held, and I did not raise a hand, except to protect my face from a blow. Besides, I knew well enough that any aggression on our part would result in a ghastly tragedy, the firing and shooting down of a large number of our men. 1928 had been full of labor disputes and strikes. 1929 carried on likewise. Bombay textile labor, miserable and militant, took the lead in these strikes. The labor movement was becoming class conscious. The government struck suddenly at organized labor by arresting some of its most prominent workers from the advanced groups. This was the beginning of the famous Mirror trial, which lasted 4.5 years. The Defense Committee was formed, of which my father was chairman. The whole process seemed to us a farce, for whether we defended a political or labor case or not, the result was likely to be the same. The 1929 Congress was going to be held in Lahore. Gandhiji's name was recommended for the presidentship by the provincial committee, but he would not accept. At the last moment, he pressed my name forward. My election was indeed a great honor and a great responsibility for me. We have but one goal today, that of independence. Independence for us means complete freedom from British domination and British imperialism. I must frankly confess that I am a socialist and a republican, and I am no believer in modern kings of industry and princes, or in the order which produces them, who have greater power over lives and fortunes of masses than even kings of old, and whose methods are as predatory as those of old feudal aristocrats. I recognize, however, that it may not be possible for a body constituted such as this National Congress, and in the present circumstances of the country, to adopt a full socialist program. January the 26th was fixed as Independence Day, when a pledge of independence was to be taken all over the country. We believe that it is the inalienable right of the Indian people, as of any other people, to have freedom and to enjoy the fruits of their toil and have the necessities of life so that they may have full opportunities of growth. The British government in India has not only deprived the Indian people of their freedom, but has based itself on the exploitation of the masses and has ruined India economically, politically, culturally, and spiritually. We believe, therefore, that India must sever the British connection and attain Purna Swaraj, or complete independence. Independence Day came January 26th, 1930, and it revealed to us, as in a flash, the earnest and enthusiastic mood of the country. This celebration gave the necessary impetus to Gandhiji, and he felt, with his sure touch on the pulse of the people, that the time was ripe for action. The great question that hung in the air was, how? How were we to begin? And the Mahatma gave the hint. Salt suddenly became a mysterious word, a word of power. The salt laws were to be broken. We were bewildered and could not quite fit in a national struggle with common salt. And today the pilgrim marches on his long trek. Staff in hand, he goes along the dusty roads of Gujarat, clear-eyed and firm of step, with his faithful band trudging along behind him. Many pictures rise in my mind of this man, whose eyes were often full of laughter, and yet were pools of infinite sadness. He was the pilgrim on his quest of truth, quiet, peaceful, determined, and fearless. Gandhiji was arrested on May the 5th. Father was arrested on June the 30th. I was in Naini Central Jail. On the first day of the new year, 1931, we got the news about Kamala's arrest. How I began to hate all locks and bolts and bars and walls. Sometimes a physical longing would come for the soft things in life. Friends, interesting conversation, games with children. On January the 26th, in the forenoon, I was told suddenly that my father's condition was serious and I must go home immediately. Early in the morning of February the 6th, 1931, I was watching by his bedside. He had a troublesome and restless night. Suddenly I noticed that his face drew calm, and the sense of struggle vanished from it. I thought that he had fallen asleep, and I was glad of it, but my mother's perceptions were keener, and she uttered a cry. That was his last sleep, and there was no awakening. A man of strong feelings, strong passions, tremendous pride, and great strength of will. He was very far from the moderate type. His clear thinking led him to see that hard and extreme words lead nowhere unless they are followed by action appropriate to the language. He was neither meek nor mild. And again, unlike Gandhiji, he seldom spared those who differed from him. With a broad forehead, tight lips, and a determined chin, he had a marked resemblance to the Roman emperors. I suppose I am partial to him, but I miss his noble presence in a world full of pettiness and weakness. I look round in vain for that grand manner and splendid strength that was his. Authority corrupts, and absolute authority corrupts absolutely. And no man in the wide world today has had or has such absolute authority over such large number of people as the British Viceroy of India. The Viceroy speaks in a manner such as no Prime Minister of England or President of the United States can adopt. March 1931. Civil disobedience was still going on. There came a truce or a provisional settlement between the Congress and the government. Viceroy Irwin's pact with Gandhi.
With which we have to deal.
The civil disobedience movement was ended for the time being. The other and vital question of our objective of independence remained.
content to abide.
And now I saw in the settlement that even this seemed to be jeopardized. Was it for this that our people behaved so gallantly for a year? There was nothing more to be said. The thing had been done, our leader had committed himself, and even if we disagreed with him, what could we do? Throw him over? Break from him? In my heart, there was a great emptiness, as of something precious gone, almost beyond recall. Gandhiji learnt indirectly of my distress. We had a long talk, and he tried to convince me that nothing vital had been lost, no surrender of principles made. To me personally, Gandhiji had always shown extraordinary kindness and consideration, and my father's death had brought him particularly near to me. He had always listened patiently to whatever I had to say, and had made every effort to meet my wishes. So I decided, not without a great mental conflict and physical distress, to accept the agreement and to work for it wholeheartedly. There appeared to me to be no middle way. This is the way the world ends, not with a bang, but a whimper.